Hello, great souls. Welcome to our satsang talk today, journeying through the reflections on Autobiography of a Yogi. Let's take a moment to begin together with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters of self-realization, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, we humbly bow to you all. Guide us as we study this beautiful book filled with divine power. Help us to be present to the gifts that are being offered to us, receptive, willing, curious, open to these gifts, and help us to share them with all. Om. Peace. Amen. Okay, great souls. So we last time we're looking at chapter 10, and as I prepared today, I just felt that there was a lot more to touch upon and talk about. It's such a rich chapter. The last part of the chapter is Yogananda meeting his guru. And so I just wanted to revisit that and talk a little bit about this relationship of disciple and guru. The very beginning of Autobiography, a famous line that is often repeated that is speaks to this. I'm going to read that line for us. This is chapter 1. This is the very, very beginning of chapter 1. The characteristic features of Indian culture have long been a search for ultimate verities and the concomitant disciple-guru relationship. My own path led me to a Christ-like sage whose beautiful life was chiseled for the ages. He was one of the great masters who are India's sole remaining wealth. Emerging in every generation, they have bulwarked the land against the fate of Babylon and Egypt. I find my earliest memories covering the anachronistic features of a previous incarnation. And then he goes on and talks about him coming into the world. But I wanted to mention that he begins that very first sentence talking about discipleship and guru. And I would say that of all the topics that we cover in yoga, it is one of the most, how would I characterize it? Well, I'll say it this way. It can be one of the most challenging topics for students because guru has a connotation that sometimes is very positive. I have had students and known people who they're very comfortable with the terminology with guru, and they refer to teachers as gurus. So part of what I wanted to do today is talk a little bit about in the teachings of from Paramahansa Yogananda and Ananda, what do we mean when we talk about guru? What did Yogananda mean in this book about guru? So I've experienced students and people who are very comfortable with the term, very open to it, all the way to the other side of the continuum where that's a scary word. There's a feeling with the terminology of guru that you are subjecting yourself in a scary and dangerous way to the influence of someone. And so it just feels worth noting to just go to talk about how do we navigate this journey of guru. So first let me begin with what Yogananda and Swami Kriyananda said, that the definition of guru that we're looking at today. So when we use the word at Ananda of guru, and we refer to the 5 gurus, the 5 masters of this path, and primarily Yogananda, who wrote Autobiography of a Yogi, these are self-realized masters, which means they are in a state of full liberation. They have no ego. They have transcended the ego. Their only purpose is to help and support others and to be of service to the world. So a true guru, and these 5 on the path of self-realization are not the only gurus. Jesus is on this path, one of the masters, which sometimes can be surprising for people. How is it? And Yogananda talks in this book of Autobiography how Jesus is one of the masters. In fact, Jesus and Babaji came together. It's said that Jesus appeared to Babaji and asked for his help. And the 2 of them, according to these teachings, are overseeing the world, this earth. They're overseeing everything that's happening and unfolding. So they have their spiritual consciousness. Their consciousness is wrapped around the planet, and it can be for me, a very comforting thought to think of that. So when we're talking about a self-realized master, that's part of what I said is there's no ego. They are pure, perfect channels of God. God's energy flows through them perfectly, uninterrupted. There's nothing to block it. And let's see, the other thing with Yogananda's life, Yogananda was an avatar. I could say is an avatar because he left his body, but his consciousness continues, which is a teaching of yoga, that there is no death. The body dies, the physical body, but the soul is immortal, and we don't die. So the soul of Yogananda is still living, not in this physical body, but still living. Now, there have been people who've had visitations of Yogananda. There's a story later in the chapter where Sri Yukteswar comes to Yogananda after he has died, the resurrection of Sri Yukteswar. So it is possible for the masters to resurrect themselves as Jesus did, and for people to literally experience them tangibly, physically. But mostly that's not the role of these masters. That's not how they are interceding and supporting and helping us. But it is true, it is said, and I believe it to be true, that the masters, someone asked Yogananda before he died, will you still be near us after you go, after you leave the body? Will you still be near? And he said, to those who think me near, I will be near. And what that talks about is a relationship with the guru that doesn't end at physical death. And what the gurus rely upon in order to help us is our receptivity to them. So those thinking of the guru, aligning our energy with the guru. Early in Yogananda, in his relationship with Sri Yukteswar, it's beautiful. So I'll go back to that in the chapter where they have this encounter for Yogananda recognition. He recognizes this is not the first time I've been at my master's feet. This is an eternal relationship, and we've been this before. We've been in this relationship before. So there's a sense of coming home, right? A familiarity, of a belonging. And the heart of it is love. So Sri Yukteswar, Yogananda says in the book, past, present, and future, he saw this all-encircling scenes. This was not the first son to find me at these holy feet. And then a little bit later, Sri Yukteswar says, Yogananda is looking into his eyes of tenderness. And the master says, I give you my unconditional love. And then and they fell into a deep silence. Right? And then he asks Yogananda, will you give me the same unconditional love? And this is the heart of relationship with the masters and with a guru. It's devotional. It's famously quoted that Sri Yukteswar has said in his book, The Holy Science, that the only way to progress on the spiritual path is with love. We can know all the techniques, all the practices, we can know the philosophy, but if we aren't moving with a heart-centered approach, a devotional approach, we won't be able to progress spiritually because we won't be open to the vibration, to the teachings, to the power. Christ said to all those, or it is said about Christ, to all those who received him, gave he the power to become the sons of God. So this relationship between guru and disciple, we find guidelines for that in all relationships of teacher and student. And I wanted to mention that today because sometimes teacher-student or teaching and student is more understandable or easier to approach. People can feel more comfortable with a teaching. They can feel then from a teaching, they might become comfortable with a teacher, and from a teacher, ultimately, to be comfortable with a guru, a supreme teacher, a supreme master, right? But it's a journey. I've talked about this before, I'm not sure in this series, but Swami Kriyananda wrote a beautiful play about, all of his plays probably one way or another are talking about discipleship. But in this particular play, it's a story about the master returning, and it's meant to be about Yogananda coming back. Yogananda said he would return in 200 years. And so this is a play that's in the future, and it's Yogananda coming. And so it centers around a storyteller and a skeptic and the skeptic's family. And the son and the wife are very devotional, but the skeptic is not. And it's beautiful in terms of illustrating our own soul's journey with teachings and with a master, right? And towards the end of the play, there's an opportunity. The skeptic has had a change of heart. So it's a beautiful story of how that comes about. But at the end, he has an opportunity to actually meet the master, right? And now that he's receptive, it's assumed he would want to. Swami has said that he used to say, because he lived with Yogananda, he said, it's not easy being with a master because you see yourself completely and they have tremendous energy. And so your consciousness is dynamically impacted being with a master. So he said, many of us think that's what we want. Of course, it's a great blessing, but sometimes we need the disciple of a master, right? Like maybe that's what we're ready for. And then other times we need the teacher of a disciple of a master or the book. It's fine wherever we are. I'm mentioning this play because the skeptic decides he's not ready to meet the master. But what he is ready for is to go to the temple where there are pictures of the masters, where the sacred texts are, where there are rituals. And that for him is a huge step forward on his spiritual journey. So it's transformational for him. And part of what we look at, Swami many years ago coined the term directional psychology. And he said in our spiritual life, part of what we want to do is practice self-honesty and discernment about where we are and tune into point yourself in the direction of light, point yourself in the direction of self-realization, and then ask yourself, what am I ready for? What's my next step? Now, the blessing of a teacher is a teacher can help you discern that. And I know that from the experience of being both a student, having teachers, and being a teacher. And this comes up often in yoga postures class. I've had many students say to me, that when they come to class, they experience something. Sometimes one of the most obvious is that they'll practice longer and they'll go a little bit further than they would if they were on their own. I know that myself when I go to a yoga class with a teacher, that they're guiding me in a pose and I'm tuning in, I'm listening, I'm trying to practice the pose, and I can just tell, if I was at home, I'd probably come out by now. I can just tell I would, right? And I could stay longer, it's not a problem, but I recognize and usually how that happens, the thought will come in, I wonder how long this will go on. I wonder how much longer I'll be in the pose. And part of our practice, which yoga postures is very good at, is guiding the mind away from that thought and going into the pose a little more fully and deeply. You know, it just happens. You're in your physical body. We have the thoughts come in. But that's what I do. If that thought comes in, I can smile at myself for having it because I don't know. There's a vulnerability when you're being taught, right? I'm not directing the show, the teacher is. And if I feel safe with the teacher and also practicing self-honesty, I could come out of the pose if I need to. But I ask myself, do I need to come out? No, I don't. If I was at home, I probably would, but I don't need to. Okay, a few more breaths and then the teacher leads me out. Now, sometimes I do come out of the pose. And this is, again, part of self-honesty, is listening to your own truth. And this is an important part of the journey, especially when we're talking about guru. Because a guru, a true guru, does have this capacity to help us remarkably. Like there's I'm having difficulty finding the words. I mean, profound comes to mind. That I think that'll suffice to say profound. But their influence is because they are perfect channels of God. They have a way of bringing God directly into our lives and helping us with that power to transform old negative patterns, healing on every level. I mean, it's the power of God that a guru brings. So part of our practice in working with a guru is our own practice of receptivity. And again, we can cultivate this by having teachers in our lives and having teachings and begin to practice receptivity to the teaching, receptivity to the teacher. So one of the first things to navigate with a teacher is to be discerning about, are they a good fit for you? And part of how you can discern if a teacher is a good fit is what you notice about yourself, not just during the time that you're with them, but what you notice afterward. What's your experience? And part of what we would be looking for is a stronger sense. I'll first speak to qualities. So a spiritual teacher, let's just keep it a focus on spiritual teacher. So a spiritual teacher will be encouraging, uplifting, inspiring, expanding for you. That would be a natural experience to have with a spiritual teacher who's a good match for you. That teacher can be all of those things while challenging you to do something you don't want to do. That's tricky. That's one of the most tricky aspects of working with a spiritual teacher. If they ask you, they suggest something or recommend a direction for you that is not attractive. It feels like, oh, I don't feel like doing that. I mean, usually that's not the first thing that happens, but it does happen in this story. This does happen with Yogananda and his guru. First, there's this overwhelming, I love you, guru. You know, I'm so happy to see you and be with you. I love you unconditionally. And then a little bit later, they're back at the hermitage. Sri Yukteswar, in fact, says to him, I give you my hermitage. All of my possessions, everything that is mine, I give to you. And Yogananda says, the only thing that I want from you, which is no small thing, is God realization. It's your spiritual qualities. That's what I want. Okay, right? That's what he's saying. But then Sri Yukteswar says, what I'd like you to do is go back home. I'd like you to go home and to leave the ashram you're in, which that was fine. He wasn't really thriving at all in that ashram. So he was fine leaving that ashram. But Yogananda did not want to go back home. His family, his older brother Ananta, had ridiculed him many times about his spiritual search and had no confidence that Yogananda would be able to remain faithful to it. His father wanted him to choose a different life for himself. So there was a lot of family pressure to not stay true to his spiritual quest and his spiritual calling in life. And going home would easily look to others like a failure. It would look like, see, in fact, my brother was right. I didn't have what it takes to be faithful. And Sri Yukteswar, he wasn't concerned about that. He understood, but it was the right choice. He knew what was the right choice for Yogananda. Not only that, I'll hold off on that because it's later in later chapters it talks more about that. But so then what he said to Yogananda is, because I have told you of my love for you, right? He showered him with that love. And Sri Yukteswar is so beautiful. My own, you have come back to me, right? I've so long waited for you. He said, because I gave that to you, what he was speaking to is that it's like a level of familiarity where Yogananda felt he could defy his guru. He could say no. He did say no. And Sri Yukteswar said, well, you will end up doing it, right? You will end up doing it. Yogananda, I won't. Okay. Well, you will, and you'll come back to me. And when you come back to me, you'll have to ask to be my disciple again. And I won't give you a yes so easily and quickly as I did the first time. So this is a principle in terms of working with a teacher. It could sound like Sri Yukteswar was offended, right? And so because he's offended, he said, well, I won't be so open to you. But that's not it. The truth is, he was telling Yogananda, I can't work with you if you're not obedient. If you're unwilling to follow my guidance, I can't guide you. And that is that's a core principle in teaching. So in yoga teacher training, I might have touched upon this a little bit last time. One of the programs we offer here is the 200-hour yoga teacher training. And it's a beautiful program on so many levels. But one of the things that we're training, and it's a beautiful way that Ananda approaches teaching, which comes from Swami Kriyananda and his time with Yogananda, that these principles of offering to others, of sharing. So the teacher is in a position of sharing truth and sharing teachings, never imposing them, right? And at the same time, the teacher's responsible for that period of time that a student has given you the responsibility to make sure that the student is safe and okay and taking care of themselves. So part of what you navigate, and you can navigate as an Ananda yoga teacher, is how much flexibility and creativity do you allow a student in your class to be doing their own thing when you're teaching something? Because sometimes students, they really do need that. They really do need to be doing it differently, not just coming out of a pose, but other things, right? I have had students who they get so much out of the class and being there, but in some ways they're doing their own routine while I'm teaching. Now that's not the most common thing, but it happens. So in a teacher training, we talk about it and say, how do you navigate that as a teacher? And what I will say and what we talk about is there's a difference between a student that needs space to make something their own, but they're very respectful and they really are there to be guided and to be taught. They are. That is their spirit. They're not being defiant. Yogananda was being defiant. They're not defiant, right? They're your students. So then you can keep an eye on them, make sure they're okay. They're in the flow and they're getting a lot out of it. And it's just perfect for them. So you don't need to worry about it. So we'll tell teachers, right? Talk to your student, get a feel for it, right? Students who are defiant, who are not receptive to being taught, you can actually, and I don't think I've ever had to do this, I've taught for many, many years, but you can, and we tell our teachers, you can tell a student that you're not comfortable with that for them staying in your class because it comes down to safety. So if a student is defiant and doing their own thing, you are compromised as a teacher in being able to help them, because you need as a teacher to be able to feel that you have an influence with the student. And if you see them doing something, which students can do, that is dangerous for them, compromising their health and well-being in some way, you need to be able to correct it. And you need to know that you can correct it. You need to know that you have that authority that's been given to you. So it's unusual, but it does happen. It can happen that a student is defiant. They actually aren't your student. I had a student who was not. I subbed for a teacher. I remember this so well. Now, she wasn't defiant in the way that she hurt herself, which was fine. And she did let me know at the beginning of class she was going to do her own thing. And that's fine, right? But she was definitely not my student because she was so unhappy with my teaching and how I was teaching, and definitely let me know, which is fine to let me know that. But it's a principle, right? So the point, and when I've talked about this, I don't talk about it a lot, but with teachers, you let students, it's very, very important, you let them choose. They have to choose. And that's really what Sri Yukteswar is saying to Yogananda. Because we can think that we want something or be ready for something, but are we really ready for it? And what does that look like? And what happens when we go too far or we give too much? So when guru, this idea of guru being a problem, like imposing a will on you and you no longer have choice, that is not the role of a guru. So it is a refined practice where I give you the authority to guide my life. I mean, and we should be discerning about giving that to anyone. We should be very discerning and test those waters to make sure that at the end of the day or the end of the experience, each time you engage, you come out with a stronger sense of yourself. The true guru is a guru to bring you to your highest self. And that's what you should be experiencing from true teachings and a true teacher, and definitely from a guru. The other thing about the gurus, and Yogananda said this of himself, is that if I'm not your guru, he said, I will lead you to your guru. So that, because they're only there to serve. And the guru-disciple relationship is a sacred relationship. Not everyone is your guru. So that's, and just like not everyone is your teacher. So being able to be curious. Some of the principles for working with a teacher, working with teachings, working with a guru is receptivity, curiosity, willingness. I wrote some things down just as to help me remember to talk about courage and trust, balancing that with discernment. So you have the experience, and coming out of the experience, are you more yourself? Do you feel more connected to your own highest truth, to your inner wisdom, to a sense of light within yourself? Is your consciousness and perception expanded? Are you growing in important ways? These are very good things to be testing the waters of. Yogananda said, and this is our course, Raja Yoga is an art and a science. He said, don't take my word for it. Practice these things and discover for yourself the truth of it. I'll end with a beautiful story about finding your guru. Some of you may have heard this before. It's a true story. Swami Kriyananda was giving a talk and talking about guru, and a man who had come to hear the talk had been in deep, deep discernment. Who is my guru? And he thought Sai Baba might be his guru, but he wasn't quite sure. He didn't want to go all the way, he was American, he didn't want to go all the way to India and be wrong. So he went to this talk hoping to get clarity. And at a certain point, and I've heard the story in slightly different ways, so I don't know if he asked the question and this was an answer to the question, or he was simply asking it within his heart, and Swami said this. But Swami said, you know, when your guru will find you, right? So you don't have to worry so much about how do I find my guru. When you're ready, ready yourself for the guru. And when you're ready, your guru will come to you. And at that moment, a picture that was above the man, he didn't know this, fell off the wall, landed in his lap, face up, looking at him, and it was Sai Baba. I mean, right as those words were spoken, your guru will come to you. You'll know your guru, right? You just in this story, you'll recognize him. You'll recognize the truth of it. So I just wanted to say a little bit more today about the journey of relationship with teachings and teacher, and it's a balancing between honoring your own inner truth, what listening deeply, resonating, this feels right to me. I feel myself growing in very positive, good ways every time I study this teaching, I work with this teacher, I turn to this guru. These are good signs that you are on the right path for yourself. Always stay open and listening to that deep inner voice for truth. Okay, dear souls, that's our talk today. Many blessings to you. I'll see you next time.